Hello everybody and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
What's cracking?
Reuben Bressler.
Hey, it's good to be back.
He is talking about Magic cards, as we do.
Talking about a lot of Magic cards. Usually we have like a slightly shorter list of cards we got
over 3,000 this time.
But
there were so many.
We had a missing stair, a missing piece of our list. So we needed to rectify that.
Yeah, I didn't even. This is one of the things that, as I have been counting, we've done 132 top 10s. So we might have forgotten to talk about the 4 CMCs, but we talked about the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 5.
Right.
Did we? Okay. I wondered why you picked this one. It seemed so random at the time. And I was like,
well, we did do Hill Giants.
And we did do Hill Giants.
So we specifically did 4 mana 3/3s, but we didn't just do 4 mana cards.
Yes.
Which is weird.
Which was a little weird. And also because it was such a huge card pool, and I wanted to, so for example, for me, some rules on this one for me was I wanted to have one from every color, an artifact, and a multicolor card. So I have that as part of my list because it's,
Let's see.
It's kind of how I ran
See if I did that.
My only rule was that I had to have actually played and enjoyed these cards, because sometimes I pick cards that have, done well, but I've never personally played with them, or, I like the idea of them, or I like them in other people's hands. But I have played with every single one of these cards, and they've all sparked joy in me, as Marie Kondo would say.
Very nice.
I've accidentally followed Evan's rules. I have one of each color. I have an artifact. I actually have 2 artifacts. And I have a multicolored card.
Excellent.
And these have all sparked joy for me as well. And these are all
I think I
cards
need
that
those
I've
too,
cast.
just kind of coincidentally.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, we also began with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Reuben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 rogues. Reuben?
Well, I decided to go with Matt Rucker's comment, and I'll let it slide that he spelled my first name wrong, because his last name is spelled R-U-E. So I'll take it. It's fine.
Sure, it's fine.
But he says, Reuben, Outlaws Merriment? It's the Merry Men. That's my honorable mention. It makes a rogue. Leviathan, whatever. It's a perfect card. Fight me.
It's a perfect card. Fight me. Well,
Leviathan, whatever. It's a perfect card. Fight me.
Is
maybe the best sentence I've ever read.
That's amazing. Outlaws Merriment, for those who don't know, is a mythic rare from Throne of Eldraine. It's a white, red, and a generic mana for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, choose one at random. Create a red and white creature token with those characteristics. It's either a 3/1 human warrior with trample and haste, a 2/1 human cleric with lifelink and haste, or a 1/2 human rogue with haste, and quote, when this creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to any target.
One of few cards that makes human tokens. I was thinking about putting General Kudro in my Queen Marchesa deck, which we'll certainly talk about later in the show, and I needed to run humans to really make it work. And I was like, well, there's gotta be, let's see what makes human tokens. And there were, according to Scryfall, there were only 24 human token makers in Mardu colors. I just assumed there'd be more. You see like a knight token, or you see a soldier. Those aren't human knights. Those aren't human soldiers.
Yeah.
Like, it's really quite rare.
Yeah.
I had Robber of the Rich on my list last week, and I said that they didn't have Little John and Friar Tuck and the Merry Men. Turns out there was.
They certainly did. What World Leviathan, whatever. It's a perfect card.
Fight me. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, congratulations to Matt. Please contact Aaron on social media before she blocks you on all of them.
Thinking about it right
32,000 people have been blocked.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Well, it's jumped a little bit since the last time we talked.
That's true. Hey, you know who has a preview card this time around for the next set? Not just us, which, by the way, we have a preview card this time around.
Well, they won't know this until Friday, but whatever.
Well, whatever. If you're watching the pre-show, whatever, it doesn't matter. But also, the Mountain Goats have a preview card. Aaron,
I would have had no idea.
Favorite. Aaron's favorite.
No idea. Well, look, thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because we are talking about 4 CMC cards. There's an absolute butt ton. Is that the right way to discuss them?
Over 3,000, yeah.
And Outlaws Merriment already discussed. So we got one of them down.
One of them down. Reuben, what's your number 10? Get us off here.
Yeah, my number 10 is a card that I've had the pleasure of casting. And boy, it makes me feel so happy. So when I was building this list, I wanted to have, what is the 4-drop that is the most 4? You know what I mean? Like, what 4 is the 4iest? I want the 4iest 4 that's ever 4'd. And I was looking through all the lists, and there's some good ones, you know. There's some cards that are like, tap 4 creatures to gain 4 life, or, you know, target 4 things.
Stuff like that.
And, things along those lines. And then I came across this one, and it made me so happy. It reminded me of one of my favorite draft environments of all time, and it is just an incredible card, and it's named Split Screen. Split Screen is a 4 colorless mana artifact. It's a rare from Unstable, and it has the Agents of Sneak watermark. When Split Screen enters the battlefield, shuffle your library and deal it into 4 libraries. If anything refers to your library, choose one of your libraries for it. Play with your library's top cards revealed. When Split Screen leaves the battlefield, shuffle your libraries together.
That's amazing.
I mean, I got to play this card once with a what was the card? There was another card that dealt with like the tops of your libraries at random and things along those lines. And this card just makes me so happy.
This is one of those cards that, like, it's sort of the modern design in an Unworld, which is nice, from Unstable. And one of the coolest things about the unsets is that they're cheap, y'all. You can get any of these rares, mythic rares, just for dirt cheap. This is a 24-cent rare that you can have a ton of fun at the kitchen table, just nonstop awesome. Yeah. And the abilities from Unstable, like, they had been working on this set for so long that so many of them have these sort of awesome, almost mini design stories, you know, built within them. How cool is this one, right? So nice. Aaron, what's number 10?
So for my Rakdos deck, I really wanted to lean into, you know, what Rakdos is. You know, I wanted a lot of chaos, you know, I wanted some demon tribal, but I really wanted to create moments. And even if I don't necessarily win the game, I still wanted, you know, a lot of cards that would make the game fun and entertaining. And Battle Bond is really, really good at this. There are a lot of hidden commander gems in there, you know, that I recommend people play. There's the random board wipe where it's like one last standing.
Last one standing.
Yeah, like there's all sorts of cards like that can really shake up your game, particularly if you're in Rakdos. And my number 10 is another card from Battle Bond that I really, really enjoy playing. My number 10 is Stunning Reversal. So Stunning Reversal is 3 colorless and a black. It's an instant. The next time you would lose the game this turn, instead draw 7 cards and your life total becomes 1. Exile Stunning Reversal. I have cast this card untapped and then won the game with Liliana's Contract before, which felt amazing. And so this is exactly what I wanted from my deck. I wanted these sort of show-stopping, no pun intended, cards that feel very Rakdos, where it's like, oh, you think I'm dead? Haha. Are you not entertained? And it's very entertaining to play this card.
I mean, just look, the name, the artwork, like the ability, it's just everything. Like, just give me an extra hand. Just give me one more turn. It'll be fine. You know, and that's exactly what it gives you. That's awesome. Also, super affordable, less than $1. Let's do this.
Absolutely.
Great. I'll take the fun in that.
Yeah.
For my number 10, this would be essentially my green entry into my top 10. And when I was looking for the green stuff, man, there's so many good options. There's Baloths and stuff. I mean, there's a whole variety of creatures that I could choose. But one of the things I want to know was that it's more important to me to have sort of a bigger impact, to have entire archetypes built around you, to have, like, to know when this card came out. Like, as I was reading it in the complete set review, I was like, oh my God, this thing is nuts. This thing says very specific things. It's not every day cards let you look at certain numbers of cards at the top of your library, but when Collected Company lets you look at 6.
Oh, no.
6. Collected Company is a green 3 generic mana for a rare, showed up originally in Dragons of Tarkir. It is an instant that says, look at the top 6 cards of your library. That is so many. Put up to 2 creature cards with a converted mana cost 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This thing just showed up in Amonkhet Remastered, so now you can play it on Magic Arena, which is great. And it's one of the greenest cards. It's able to put 2 creatures into play. Super fun combos. Super cool casual card. Awesome fun in limited. You know, super great if you got something to do with it. I love Collected Company.
Wizards has this bizarre fascination with giving green free creatures, whether it be, you know, Natural Order or Birthing Pod or Green Sun or Chord of Calling. Excuse me. This is just something they're determined to make green do. And this card came out shortly after Pod got banned, if I remember correctly. And so, we were kind of reeling from that in Modern, and then they were like, here's this card in Standard. And it's like, why? Like, why do you insist on making this a green thing? I don't understand. And this card was very dominant in Standard. It still sees play in Modern occasionally. It's currently wreaking havoc on Arena now. Jund Sacrifice decks, I believe, are running this card. And all sorts of other decks. And it's just an obnoxious card, and I don't know why Wizards keeps trying to do this, because it never ends well. It's just
I remember so clearly sitting next to Brad going like, man, you look at the top 6, you know how many that is? Yeah. Like after you've drawn your opening hand, you're looking at more than 10% of your library. Like it is.
And you're also putting in not
instant
only
speed.
I was just going to say, you're putting it in at instant speed, so you're getting even more value. So you can put in your Shaman of the Pax, your Reflector Mages, your whatever at instant speed. That's absurd.
Yeah, this card will be in the conversation for a very, very long time, and that's why I liked it.
Yes, I think the other one that was like, obviously the effect is I think it's like See the Unwritten.
Yeah, didn't see
or something like that.
Yeah, like cost 6 or 7.
Yeah, it costs 6 or 7, and it puts in something from the top 6 or 7, and I was like, oh, this card sees play. Yeah, I mean the effect is just stupid if it's able to do that.
If it's good, it's fantastic. Yeah. So moving here to our number 9, Aaron. What's your number 9?
This is another one of those cards that is very entertaining. I have this in my Queen Marchesa deck because the way I've built the deck is my boyfriend likes to say my Marchesa deck is my control deck because I like to appear like I'm defenseless and like you have a shot at the crown and then you swing in at me and I play any number of instants like Teferi's Protection and all of a sudden I'm not so defenseless anymore. And this is another card that I love surprising people with. It always creates this sort of gotcha moment and people always have to read it because it has a lot of text on it. My number 9 is Comeuppance. So Comeuppance is 3 colorless and a white. It was originally printed in Commander 2014. It is an instant. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and planeswalkers you control this turn by sources you don't control. Great, I'm in. If damage from a creature source is prevented this way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to that creature. So a lot of times it's like a board wipe in some cases. If damage from a non-creature source is prevented this way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to the source's controller. I can't tell you how many times I've sprung this on people, and right before you cast this, someone's like, how big is everything? And people are like, oh, why? There's enough lethal here. I'm like, it's going to be relevant.
Yeah, give me
like,
a second.
I need to know what I'm dealing with here. And then you're just like, whoop. And it's just hilarious.
And they're like,
just
after
moment,
the Crater Hoof triggers and
it's like I told you didn't want none. Like you shouldn't have made me get off the couch.
Yeah, this card is not only excellently named, but it is the kind of effect that you need in a deck like Queen Marchesa that doesn't have access. It's a counterspell, essentially. Yeah. It's not just a counterspell. It's a counterspell with a fog. It's a counterspell with an honorable passage attached. It's a counterspell with I'm not dying this turn attached, even if other people want to do other stuff after that. That's a spectacular effect.
I mean, and whether you're blocking, it still blows them out. I mean, this thing is nuts. There's a reason it's $6.50 because wow. All right.
Only printed once. Yeah.
Absolutely. Reuben, what's number 9?
My number 9 is a card that has the twofer that I always love to have, which is that it won a PT and it's still, to this day, in the cube. Even after being printed for the first time in Visions, still in the MTGO Vintage Cube. And it also won Worlds back in 1997 in Seattle in the hands of Jakob Slemmer in the Black 5 deck. Black 5 was essentially a black weenie deck that had access to all 5 colors. But you had Black Knight and you had Knight of Stromgold, and you did some little ticky-tack stuff. You had a bunch of come-into-play creatures, and then you had a 4-drop as your way to make sure that you could keep the gas on, which was Necrotal.
Yeah.
Necrotal, 2 colorless, black. It's a 2/1, printed as a summon Necrotal. These days it is a human assassin. Reprinted a number of times, most recently Commander 2014. It's a 2/1 with first strike, and when Necrotal enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. That creature can't be regenerated. Of course, Necrotal has had many spiritual successors in the form of things like Skin Render, Ravenous Chupacabra, Skin Thinner even. Lots of follow-ups, but Necrotal, especially in Visions, I think Visions was the first, or no, Mirage was the first set that had come into play abilities. But Visions was the first one that really latched onto it.
I think that might be right. And Visions might be the first, but all I know was I was there at the time, and Necrotic was like insane. Necrotic has kind of things going against it in that it references regeneration, so they're not going to put it in standard, so they have to put it in the master sets, but they won't put it at common because, please, for God's sakes, Popper would love this card. Like, yes, there's some common cards that do similar things, but just destroying a creature when it enters the battlefield, giving us Ravenous Chupacabra at common, that would be amazing. In a master's type set with a much higher power level, right? But Necrotic is great, has been fantastic from the moment it showed up, and it really did blow up a lot of people's minds. You're like, wait, I get this and this happens? Because before then, like, the spells were what would make things kind of happen. You know what I mean? Like, you play creatures, do whatever, you might attack, but like when I play a spell, that's when stuff's going to work. Now it's like, I play a creature, stuff's going to happen, and that's really cool, and that's where that changed. Let's move on here to my number 9. This card is dope. It's won, I don't know how many Pro Tours this thing won. I don't know how long it took before this thing reached all the way back into Legacy. I know that it is a very iconic effect. It has an iconic image. It has an incredible promo image that was from John Avon. He made prints of this thing. It was absolutely fantastic. But, you know, when you're talking about this being my multicolor entry into a 4 CMC, and I say, what's the 4 CMC multicolor card? And you go, Supreme Verdict. And Supreme Verdict is my 4 CMC multicolor card for a blue, 2 white, and a generic mana. It is a rare sorcerer that cannot be countered, and it just destroys all creatures. That's what it does.
Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, when this and the other 3, I think, spells that couldn't be countered were printed in Return to Ravnica, people were like, wait a second. This is absurd. This Abrupt Decay, Counter Lash or something. What was the blue
I can't remember the last
spell?
one. It wasn't that good.
And
Counterflux.
Counterflux, that's the one. And then there was another one that I'm forgetting. All of them had, immediately people were like, oh dear. And Supreme Verdict immediately had an impact on every format. This was back when, you know, red, white, blue control was really good in Modern. It immediately slotted into that deck. It was the thing to play in Standard for a very long time alongside Sphinx's Revelation. And it made it all the way back to Legacy in Miracles. People were playing Supreme Verdicts because they needed to deal with whatever they had to deal with.
And Wizards was scared of this card for years. We didn't have good board wipes for a while. We got like End Hostilities.
Yep.
You know, we got like the Languish, we got the Anger of the Gods, but it wasn't until recently that they really started kind of letting up a little bit and letting us have Kaya's Wrath and letting us have, you know, the Extinction Event and things like that. But for a while there, we weren't getting 4-mana board wipes. And even then the 5 ones were like,
Right,
we'll
the 5
take
were like
it, but
fumigate.
so like you could tell that like Wizards was really kind of hesitant of like, we don't want to go anywhere near that because this was as good as it got for a while.
Right.
Sphinx's Revelation burned them real bad. Like it burned them seriously bad. That card was not good for the health of much of anything, and it was a very
now it's in
card.
Historic, apparently.
And now it's in Historic
with great new art
because competitive players really enjoy it, and that's cool because you don't know you've lost, but you've lost. And kind of wrapped up in that, I feel like Supreme Verdict kind of got snagged in there. They said, you know what, 4-mana board wipes and stupid card draw life gain, not okay. So they just moved it aside for a very long time. But I'm happy to see our Kaya's Wrath these days. I mean, even the Extinction Event's kind of narrow, right? Doesn't get everything. So I'll take it. Let's move on here to number 8. Mine is higher on someone else's list, and that is okay because it rocks. Reuben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is my green entry on the list, and it is also the last artifact entry on the list. That should tell you what it is. It's a card that is banned in Modern. It somehow hasn't won a major tournament. It's won a couple Grand Prix. And it's still in the Legacy Cube, although they took it out of the Vintage Cube. It's harkened back to a bunch of stuff. Before Collected Company was the Creature Toolbox card, Birthing Pod was the Creature Toolbox card.
Oof.
Birthing Pod is 3 colorless and a green Phyrexian mana that can be paid with either a green mana or 2 life. And it has an ability that is a colorless and a Phyrexian mana that can also be paid with 2 life or a green. And tap and sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only at a time that you could cast a sorcery. This card is, I mean, it's long been lauded as the rebirth of the creature toolbox strategy. I mean, we had Court of Calling stuff for a while there, but then Melirapod took over. All of the persist creatures, Kitchen Finks, Murderous Redcap, being able to go combo with Melira, and a sacrifice outlet, typically Viscera Seer, and you could just go to town. Later, those sort of transformed into just creature toolbox decks. Like, I got a Quizali Pride Mage, I got a Bird of Paradise, I got a Gavany Township, I guess I'll attack you for 6, and then 8, and that's how I'll win instead. Yeah. And Birthing Pot, like, this is another card that has their devotees that are like, please, just give us back Birthing Pot.
Yeah, you knew that Birthing Pot... Sometimes you see a card getting too big for its britches, where you're like, okay, you're doing a lot right now, and now it's time for you to get banned. And for Birthing Pod, I knew it was time to go when people were potting into Obsidian. When the new Obsidian got printed, it was like, okay, you shouldn't be allowed to pot into Obsidian. That's obnoxious. And, you know, and one thing I really liked about the pod deck was I liked the restrictions around it, where you really did have to have a chain of like year 1 and year 2. And I really admired that. I thought that was really cool. But, you know, it was just this engine that, you know, it would only get better as creatures got better, which you knew that was the direction that Wizards was going in. So you knew that this card was only going to get worse or better. And so, you know, it did have to go, but I do think it's a brilliant design. I do appreciate what it did for decks. I just think, you know, when certain cards came out, it was like, when you're pairing with Archangel of Thune or you're pairing with Melira, I think if there wasn't a danger of an infinite combo, I think it's perfectly fine. But there were just too many I win moments where it was like, I don't like it.
Right. It was so good in Standard when I was going to get Totem Guide Heartbeast. You know, when the top of my chain was an Inferno Titan sacrifice to go get an Elish Norn. Like, those were the mirrors I liked.
Yeah, I would play, you know, there's been a lot of talk about Birthing Pod getting unbanned lately compared to some of the more powerful cards that have come out, and I would play Birthing Pod if it came back. I did play it last time because it was quite expensive, and I just come back to the game, but, you know, now that I have some more resources, if this ever got unbanned, I'd probably sleeve it up. It seems like my jam, you know?
I mean, it would definitely bounce back to 30 or 40 bucks probably immediately.
I would do it,
It'd be a Stoneforge situation.
I also hit Mythic with a Prime Speaker Vanifar deck on Arena once, and that harkens back to the days of Birthing Pod. I love that style.
Right. I mean,
Prime Speaker I look at Vanifar, and it's like that meme of the cereal where it's like, we've got Pod at home. But I want Birthing Pod.
Well, then they also gave us like spell Birthing Pod on
the enchantment one.
Right. And then Eldritch Evolution went up 2 even. Plus a card, which was kind of crazy and done some stupid stuff. But Birthing Pod itself being sort of one of the first real toolboxes. This was, it's always going to get better because they're never going to stop printing creatures. It's always going to have something interesting to do. You get it out on turn 2 from a mana accelerator and some life. Like, this thing caused problems from turn 3 onwards pretty consistently. So warping a format is a thing it can do. I can understand them not wanting to put it back in Modern. Let's see here. So let's go on here to number 7. So I'll kick off.
Number 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your number. Oh, I missed that. Aaron, please. What is your number 8? Mine was higher on somebody else's list.
That's okay. My number 8 is a card I've talked about in passing already in the short time that we've been doing this episode. One of my favorite commanders. I'm in the process of retooling it and freshening it up a little bit because she's gotten a little stale since I've been running her for so long. But she's one of my favorites. I loved her enough to get altered. My number 8 is Queen Marchesa. I have the crown. Don't make me get it. So Queen Marchesa is 1 colorless, a red, a white, and a black. She was originally printed in Conspiracy Take the Crown. Legendary creature, human assassin, 3 power, 3 toughness, death touch, and haste. When she enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the monarch, you get a 1/1 black assassin creature token with death touch and haste onto the battlefield. So I love the monarch. I love what it does for commander games. This card is also seen play in Legacy. The Maverick or the Nick Fit decks like to play this. It's just something you kind of go get or you draw or whatever. And it's just a really fun card. The ability to get the monarch back quite easily. A lot of times people are not going to jeopardize whatever they have for your assassins, so you're probably going to get it back. And you can also use those assassins for other reasons. I like to feed them to Westvale Abbey when you're done. There's all sorts of things you can do, but just more or less what she embodies. Like, I just love this character so much. And when I'm playing this deck, I just feel very, very royal and very, you know, I love it so much. It's just one of my favorite decks ever.
Do you have a foil Queen Marchesa?
I don't like foils.
It's
But I do have her
$150.
Yeah, no, I do have her
That
foiled.
is insane.
Well, she got as high as I think 30 or 40 before the reprint. She got reprinted in Mystery Booster.
Yeah,
and for a while there, it got pretty obnoxious. But no, I got in pretty early.
Man, the Monarch might be my favorite ability to have ever been coming out of a Commander product. It is so perfect for what the format needs. Right? Because a lot of people are just like land, and just like play 4-drop spells and just smash sumo wrestlers against each other. And then that's the game. This actually is like, oh, I want to play a 1-drop. I want to play a creature land sometimes, right? I want to attack on turn 3 sometimes. Like, that's weird. It just adds a whole new layer to the game. The other thing is that it adds something interesting to Legacy, which it gives the non-blue decks a way to recoup card advantage, and also to Pauper, for that matter, with the Boros Monarch decks.
Yeah. The mechanic is fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's move on here to number 7. My number 7 here is a classic effect. It is a card that I have no idea if it is still in the cube or which cubes or what cubes or not. This is unfortunately a part of the reserve list, so it's already like $500 freaking dollars. Ridiculous. Also, to think how many I've owned over the years makes me sad. But it's also an effect that they've taken and put on different creatures, different legendary creatures. It's very powerful. It's very sort of invocative of black. I wanted to say, well, if I have a black 4 CMC card, I was very close to picking Nethervoid, but Nethervoid was kind of weird, almost like a one-shot hater card that they had back in the day. That's not really going to transmit to these days. No, these days you could say, you know what an effect you have on a card? You have the Abyss as an effect on a card.
Yes.
Oh, is that card? Oh, Sheoldred has the Abyss on her. Oh, crap.
Yeah, right.
The Abyss was originally from Legends, a black and 3 generic mana for a world enchantment. Is still a world enchantment, apparently. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, destroy target non-artifact creature that player controls of their choice. It can't be regenerated.
That art.
I love it. Yeah.
I think Pete Ventnor's even did a play. I think there was a playmat series of this, and I just didn't get on it and I just kicked myself for it. Because even now I look at it, like, I just now realize there's the screaming guy on the right. It's like, it's so good.
It is so sweet.
Man, there are some cards that you're just like, well, here's this, and then the game is just over. The game is just completely over at that point.
Yeah.
And the Abyss and Nethervoid are both on those lists of just like, well, there is no way you're ever coming back from an Abyss. And it is amazing. I kind of want them to bring world enchantments back. Just cause. Like, I don't think they're that complicated. Yeah. It's like, this is a world enchantment. There can only be one world enchantment on the board at a time. Is that complicated? I don't think so.
I mean, and also you could work around it. You know, if you had an artifact creature, then you couldn't target it. Yep. Also note that something like Shroud, you'd also get around it because it can't be targeted. You have to target that creature. A lot of little nuance in this card. And again, it makes me sad. Like, we're not going to see it because of the reserve list, but at the same time, because it talks about regeneration, we could have an Abyss-like effect. We can have the Shoulders of the world still give us this effect, which is awesome. Reuben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is a card that I have cast in Standard, in Extended, in Block, and in Legacy. I, for some reason, sleeved this card up in Legacy at the Flash GP in 2007. I played a mono blue control deck that had Powder Keg in it, and it did okay. I made day 2, but it was not really great. But it has been a powerhouse in its lifetime in Psychotog, in Oath of Druids, in Probe Go, if you remember that deck, in Blue-White Control.
Oh my god.
This card was in Counter Rebels. It was all over the place. It is, and it's also a card that is maybe one of, if not the most, skill testing cards in the history of Magic. It's fact or fiction.
Oh.
Wow.
3 colorless and a blue for an instant. Originally from Invasion, it's been reprinted 16 times at this point. Most recently in the Mystery Booster in Commander 2019. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Then you put one pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Try to pretend like you understand what's important. Yeah, this card is dope.
This card is dope. Was the ultimate like skill tester back in the day. Old school pros, FOF, EOTYL,
Yep.
Fact or Fiction, end of turn, you lose. Like when you're not as good as the pro players, and they give the pro players a card which literally delineates who's good at Magic and who's not, who can understand what pile is important and why. It was a very clear delineation moment at the point that it was printed of like, okay, the good players are playing with Fact or Fiction, and the bad players don't know what pile they should be choosing, and that's kind of where you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the reason I don't play this card, because I'm just like, it just seems like a lot of work.
It's going to make you work for it and make you think, and I feel like I've chosen the wrong pile so many times. Aaron, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is a card that saw a little bit of play in Standard, and people tried to make work to various degrees of success in other formats. I have it in my God Eternal Oketra deck because if you're going to be playing a lot of creatures, a lot of cheap creatures, you're going to be bouncing them, you throw in a bunch of Soul Warden effects, you can have a really good time, a really good plan B. My number 7 is either Flux Reservoir. No Flux given. So either Flux Reservoir was originally printed in Kaladesh. It's 4 colorless mana for an artifact, not legendary, not that it matters, but whenever you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each spell you cast this turn. And then you can pay 50 life, and either Flux Reservoir deals 50 damage to a creature player. You have not lived until you've just blown someone's face off with this. It just feels amazing. And, you gotta make sure you don't, kill yourself in the process. But even if you do, we're here to feel alive, people. And this just feels incredible. And so I love it as a plan B in my Oketra deck, where if they deal with my creatures, fine, I'll just bounce a bunch of stuff and blow your face off. Saw a little bit of a play in Standard. There was a really weird mono blue control deck that ran like Engulf the Shores, and a bunch of other, really subpar cards just to get this thing going. But I'm telling you, you got to put this on your bucket list. Just if you want to feel something, it feels incredible.
It's a hell of a Magic card. Some people were apparently playing around with outcome here, with paradoxical outcome.
Yeah. People have tried different things of all sorts of formats. There was also people doing it with Weather the Storm.
Yeah.
So you would just gain a bunch of life and you'd storm off, and then you'd use that life to put into the reservoir and blow. It's so good.
Yeah, this thing was running Brawl's Expertise, which you play free stuff for Ornithopters, like Mox Ambers. Like you can just pop.
Either Flux Reservoir. I mean, that number is just absurd.
It just makes you want to try, though. It's like Mount Everest. Like, you look at that and you're like, challenge accepted. Yep. Like, I need to do that at least once.
Pay 50 life, understood. On the list. Do it. That's
I'm
amazing.
excited for Ether Flux Reservoir to shoot the gigantic glass cannon shotgun at somebody, and then someone to have a Baron Sengir in play.
No.
Or a Comeuppance. Oh, I'm sorry. What is this card? Did you read the card? Is that do the 50 damage?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. All right, let's move on here to number 6. Reuben, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is, it's a classic. It's incredible. It is so powerful that not only is it in the cube, 2 decades after it was first printed, its exact reprint with a different name is also still in the cube.
Ooh.
It won 2 of the first 3 Worlds events, including the first one in Milwaukee in 1994 in the hands of Zach Dolan. It is Armageddon.
Yeah.
Armageddon. 3 colorless and a white sorcery. Destroy all lands. That's it.
That's what it does.
That's what it does. All lands in play are destroyed.
That's amazing. It's beautiful. It's simple. Back in the day, there really was the Armageddon strategy. Jin, literally talking today with Kendra on Twitter about how Jin could be a good common these days, which makes me sad. But, whatever. Where you would play a fatty, Armageddon, and just kill them before they could do anything else. That was a legitimate strategy.
Right. I mean, that was essentially what the original White Weenie decks did. Like Tom Sean Pang's deck was 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop Armageddon.
Absolutely.
And that was just the whole kit and caboodle.
Yep. So
my favorite story.
White Knight. Go for it.
I was going to say, my favorite story I love to tell about Armageddon is one time I was playing a commander game and I was playing my She-Ray deck. And I had just 3 really crappy creatures out in She-Ray. My opponent was feeling very confident. And they were like, I'm going to Armageddon. I still won that game. Just whoop, whoop, whoop. Bring it all back. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Get you.
It took forever, but I did it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll take it. I mean, they've made really cool versions of this over time. They brought it back for Masters 25, which was nice.
We got the Thran one, Fall of the Thran.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is cool. Just a hell of a card, though. That card was so cool. Back in the day, like, it's hard to describe how much that defined Magic back in the day. It was such a huge pillar. Like, Dark Ritual into Hippie, Dark Ritual into Necropotence, yes. Armageddon also existed, and you had to be aware of that at all times. Aaron, what's number 6?
My number 6 is one of those cards that now I'm not normally known as a red player. Like, we all know this, but and to be clear, I just don't like burn. I like red when it's intelligent, when it's different. And this card was a turning point for me because this was a card that made me want to play red. I toyed around with like mono red and standard and modern simply on the back of this card. I put it in my Pashalik Mons EDH deck and I have not regretted it. This card makes you feel something. It's incredible. My number 6 is Experimental Frenzy.
Oh, boy.
Experimental Frenzy is 3 colorless and a red. It's an enchantment from Guilds of Ravnica. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library, and you can't play cards from your hand. You can pay 3 colorless and a red to destroy Experimental Frenzy. So you pair this with something like Runaway Steamkin, and you just kind of go to town. You do a reasonable Storm impression. This saw a little bit of play in Vintage. They were doing Paradoxical Oath, and so you'd pair this with a bunch of Moxen and just have a really good time. But if you're just doing this with a bunch of cheap cantrips and draw spells, you really can just plow through your deck, and it feels amazing. And so this is exactly the kind of red that I like to play with. Yeah. And again, it's just one of those things, you want to feel something. There's no feeling like just losing your mind with Experimental Frenzy.
Oh my god, I love Experimental Frenzy. When I was experimenting with streaming Arena a lot.
I see what you did there.
I was playing Frenzy Red. Pretty much just Frenzy Red. And the song that I would queue up whenever I played a Frenzy was Screamin' Jay Hawkins' Frenzy. Do yourself a favor and go listen to Screamin' Jay singing Frenzy. He's probably best known for I Put a Spell on You. He's got that real, like, operatic, gravelly, shock rock almost kind of vibe going to him. And but going back to the card, Experimental Frenzy is that creativity that you're more of a Perforos red mage rather than a Hazoret red mage.
No, actually the opposite's true. I like Hazoret, I don't like Perforos.
No, I mean in terms of the flavor.
Okay.
In terms of
Sure.
the god of the forge. I would the wanting to create and make something new rather than just burn.
Yeah.
Right. You know, every once in a while Wizards will do something and they'll put Survival of the Fittest and they'll put the Nightmare, what's the Recurring Nightmare, all in the same set. They'll put it right in the same set. They put Experimental Frenzy and Runaway Steam Can right in the same set. Look at it, guys. Play it. I did not see this one coming. I'll be honest. I didn't think that much of this card. I thought it was okay. I was like, well, maybe it gets there. Maybe it's all right. But when you have something that's generating mana because you're playing more things that generate mana, that's playing more things, it's just, it's ridiculous. And it just took over standard for a very long time.
They were even no pun intended, they were even experimenting with this in Modern Affinity before Opal got banned because Affinity tends to sneeze out their hand very quickly, and they also tend to play a lot of cheap or free things. And so, you know, and it's not hard to Affinity because of Opal and Glimmervoid. It's not hard for them to cast things that have like a pip in them. So this was perfect. You would sneeze out your hand, you'd slam Frenzy, and then whoop, there's Cranoplating, there's Ornithopter. And then Opal got banned and Affinity effectively died. But I played Affinity with this card and it felt great.
Absolutely. So that card is dope. Let's move on here to my number 6. If it would like to pull it up here, one Scryfall, thank you. So for my number 6, this would be my artifact entry into the list. This was, again, a card that I got to play from way back in the day. Way back in the day. When, you know, when we teenage Evan was learning what a magic card was and how it works and what it does and why is this important and why are you playing this thing and why are we playing this card in particular that's going to blow up all of our stuff. It's going to blow up all of their stuff. And then I got to wait a turn on this Neveneral's Disc and what silly name. I can't even spell it. They're like, no, dude, this card is unreal awesome. And it is. The Veneral's Disc is a 4 generic mana rare artifact that enters the battlefield tapped. 1 generic mana, tap, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Note the way that is worded, and note where the colon is. You do not have to sacrifice the Mineral's Disc. If you make all of your stuff indestructible, you just tap, and pay a mana and destroy everything, every creature. Also note it does not destroy planeswalkers.
You see this in Shroom decks sometimes. They'll get like a Darksteel, reactor or whatever it is that makes everything indestructible. And then you just always have a disc and nothing of yours can die. And that's pretty much a lock at that point. It's been reprinted many, many times and still goes for about $2-3, depending on where you get it from. And, is a really great way for colors that don't really have a lot of ways to deal with permanence, where, red and black are sometimes weak to enchantments. And so this is a really great way for them to deal with things they normally couldn't. And it's just a thing to kind of put the table on notice. And you play your disc and you're like, all right, keep it cute. Like, do not make me pop this.
I will pop this disc. I will pull over and I will pop this disc right now. Or you can
exploit the weakness. You can play your planeswalkers, because this was before planeswalkers. Right. And so, if you're in a Super Friends deck and you want to, have a leg up on everybody, you can tailor your board state to where you're essentially immune from this.
I mean, I remember putting Disenchants in my main deck back in the day to stop mono black
specifically for this,
for Necropotence, so they could not get their disc off, because thank God this thing enters the battlefield tapped. Yeah,
Necropotence Control, by the way, won a Pro Tour with Nevin Rawls' disc in the main deck, 4 copies. Paul McCabe in Dallas in 1996. And the pay a colorless tap can also be interesting because you can activate it. In response, I'll return it to my hand.
It's true. Absolutely. So there's lots of really fun things you can do with a very specific wording in Magic. Let's move on here to number 5. Reuben, what's number 5?
My number 5 is my multicolor entry into my list, because it has won a Pro Tour, it's still in the cube, and it was banned in Modern for a time because it was just too powerful, although it paid for the sins of another a little bit. But it is still one of the most indelible creatures to have ever been printed. It won multiple Pro Tours. It is Bloodbraid Elf. Bloodbraid Elf is a 2-colorless green-red creature with haste and Cascade, and that is all it does. It just is a 3/2 creature with haste, and it has Cascade.
Cascade, for those who know, when you cast the spell, you exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. This thing kept Jace the Mind Sculptor in check. This thing was a paragon, essentially. There was no Jund deck that didn't have 4 of this. They just didn't exist. This card was amazing every single time. If you got the Blightning off of it, you were living the dream. It was fantastic. It was great. It's one of those cards that, in the Cascade mechanic entirely, and where I went to Wizards R&D at the time, and I was like, what is happening? Why are we getting free spells off of these already awesome spells? And they're like, well, it's fun, isn't it? And I'm like, yes, it's fun.
It's a slot machine.
Because it's ridiculously awesome and value, because I love value, but what, really? Are we okay with this? And
Wizards
it turns out
likes it when Wizards likes it when the best decks in the format can be played by new players.
Sure.
It's more fun when Jund is the best deck for them than when Cawblade.
Right. And I'm happier personally when Jund is the best deck. I like playing creatures, getting creature combat, having tricks, getting lucky off your Bloodbraid Elf. There's nothing wrong with that. Right. And honestly, they provide a lot of fun gameplay.
And this was one of the first cards that Wizards started unbanning. For a while there, people have been clamoring for, okay, you're banning pretty regularly. Let's go back and look at cards compared to the power level now. And, this really kind of opened the door for Jace, for Stoneforge Mystic, all of which is okay now. These are cards that are in Modern. They're not breaking the format. They're fine. And I'm glad that Wizards, kind of took a chance on this card and others.
Yeah, let good creatures be good is sort of the new thinking, and I'm okay with that. Aaron, what's number 5?
My number 5 is a card that I still cannot cast with a straight face. It requires a bit of a poker face to play it, but once it's out there, I cannot do it, and I'm trying so hard. I'm working good. Can't even look at it because it just relies on your opponent walking into it, and they always do. And when they do, it feels amazing. My number 5 is Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah.
Settle the Wreckage is 2 colorless and 2 white. Originally printed in Ixalan, only printed once. It's an instant. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. No, sorry. That player may search their library for that many basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This has been lovingly referred to as Wrath the Exile. This was a card that people had to play around. You didn't want to attack with everything because if you would, you'd lose your board, but you also needed to close out the game. And so could you afford to just attack with one or two things, or did you want to take the risk and go all in? And so this was just a hilarious card. I have this in my Queen Marchesa deck. I have it in my Oketra deck because you want kind of asymmetrical board wipes. And so I don't want to lose my things, but I will absolutely let you walk into mine, and they always do. And it just feels amazing.
This was a part of the most recent Magic Arena cube, and I got caught with it, and I caught somebody else with it, and it feels unbelievable both times. It is
absurd.
Ridiculous.
She's playing Modern even? Yeah.
Yeah. It is maybe the best board wipe in Brawl. I'm pretty sure that they've ever made. So just insanely powerful. Like, it changed the way that you played everything that you played when it was in Standard. I mean, it's another one that they're never going to give us this again. This is just way too much.
Well, this felt like what they were trying to do they wouldn't give us a Wrath, right? A straight Wrath. But they would give you something like this where it has to be in response. You have to have the mana open. They have to walk sort of into it. Right. Versus just saying, like, kill everything, let's go.
Isn't that why they gave that Gruul creature hexproof? Because you had to target with that? Yeah.
Yep, that was one of the things that was specifically aimed at stopping this card being so dominant.
I love it so much.
Because it was absolutely incredible. Yeah. My number 5 is because, best color of Magic is one of my blue cards that happens to be on the list. There could have been lots of options for this slot in particular. And, I like to try to think of sort of the old school stuff, the stuff that brought me the most joy when I was learning Magic, coming up with Magic, be able to say to somebody, if a Magic player comes to me and say, what are the most iconic blue 4 CMC cards? And I'm like, what will they just not give us anymore? What is not only the rate, but the powerful ability that they skirt with? But maybe there ain't nothing like a pure, unvarnished Control Magic. Control Magic is my favorite. It's 2 blue, 2 generic mana. It's an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. 1 line, you control enchanted creature.
That's, when it's like clean like that. Yeah, exactly. When it's clean like that, it just, there's no better living. They give us, there's so many of those effects now. Mind control, abduction, lay claim and confiscate, and those effects are sort of the spiritual successors of Control Magic, which also still in the cube, also won a Pro Tour, super beloved. It tells you everything you need to know. It's super simple. This is game design. This is just Magic at its cleanest.
Yeah, it really was sweet. And like, as creatures get better, you don't want this at this kind of rate. Right. But, in a world of cubes, in a world of Commander, like, you definitely want Control Magics to exist. And I love it. Yeah. All right, let's move on here to number 4. Mine is higher on someone else's list, and that is okay because it's sweet. Reuben, what's number 4?
Speaking of blue cards, this is maybe the bluest blue card that's ever blue carded. It's won multiple Pro Tours. It's still in the cube. It is absurdly powerful. It is, to this day, just one of the wildest things that you can ever do. And they did, of course, print a textless version for whatever reason. It also inspired a very blue version of itself in Unstable, which has 6 versions. But we aren't here to talk about very Cryptic Command. We're here to talk about the OG Cryptic Command. Colorless blue instant. Choose 2. Counter target spell. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. Tap all creatures your opponents control. Or draw a card. This, of course, won Worlds in the hands of Auntie Malin in Fairies. Later won Pro Tour Kyoto in 2009 in the hands of Gabe Nassif with that Quick and Toast 5-color control mix-up thing. It's the control player's dream. It's everything you want and more.
It's an unbelievable card. I've had it on so many lists. This was my pick. Like, if it wasn't Control Magic, it was definitely going to be Cryptic Command. I was like, well, I've chosen Cryptic Command. It's great. I expect you to include it, which was fine. Yep. This is just a hell of a Magic card. It's still $20+. They sent us all $40 versions for free in the mail back in the day. That was dope. It was just as baffling then. Like, it was just as fun as you can imagine when I got to see and meet Aaron Forsyth and go, why did you send me this thing textless? Yep. And he goes,
Yeah. But it's fun, right?
It wasn't his thing or whatever, so.
My first career Star City Games Open Top 8 was a legacy tournament where I had a Cryptic Command in my deck because I played Mono Blue Control. Nice. And that deck was very stupid. It had like Back to Basics and Energy Field. Oh boy.
Oh my
Those were
God.
mental misstep days, so things were weird.
Things were weird. Aaron, what's number 4?
So when you play the weird decks that I do, and spoiler season comes around, you're not looking for the rares. You're not looking for the mythic rares. You're looking for the weird uncommon. That's what's going to get you excited. And when this card came out, nobody cared except the people it was meant for. We lost our minds. And by we, I mean Dredge players. And this card changed the game for us. This was a huge boon for us in Modern. It put Modern Dredge back on the map because we were still kind of reeling from the troll ban. And we hadn't really risen back to the place we were. This card helped us get there, and is now currently seeing play in Vintage as a way to get around Tabernacle of Pendrel Vale, because you need to kill them quickly, otherwise they'll just kind of lock you out. This card is amazing. I still feel so much joy every time it triggers or however it works. My number 4 is Creeping Chill. So Creeping Chill is 3 colorless and a black. It's a sorcery from Guilds of Ravnica. It's a sorcery. I think I said that already. Sorry. Creeping Chill deals 3 damage to each opponent, and you gain 3 life. When Creeping Chill is put into your graveyard from your library, you may exile it. If you do, Creeping Chill deals 3 damage to each opponent and you gain 3 life. Let's give Dredge a free lightning helix. What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong is you can rewind to when we first saw this card. Look, this was like, you were like, all right, it's whatever. And we're like, no, this card seems really, isn't this what you like? You like this. And you're like,
you can take it or leave it.
And then when I actually
what
had
I'm
the
excited for
pleasure
is
of it,
Narcomoeba.
yeah. And then when I had the pleasure of actually trying this, it was a game breaker. Sure. And, just being able to dredge 3 and hitting like 2 of these, now we have Silver Smoke Ghoul, which pairs really, really nicely with this. And, 3 life, you get all those things back. It gets through Grafdigger's cages. It gives you a buffer as well, so you can then play like your City of Brasses and not really get hurt by them. The card is just hilarious. It always feels good, and it really just changed the game for Dredge, to be quite honest. And you can also just cast it. There've been so many times where I played Modern Dredge because Modern leans really heavily on life from the loam. It's not a dead card. Sometimes you're just like, Creeping Chill. And it's the best feeling in the world because no one's expecting you to actually pay for it.
You know what? I was going to criticize that this wasn't a real 4-drop, even though the topic was 4 CMC. Mm-hmm. This is technically, if I had a get rid of a 4-drop from your hand, this would, if I had to transgress the mind, this could target it. But then I remembered, you're Aaron Campbell. Of course you've cast this card. Probably more than any other person on the board for 4 mana.
And it also proves that if you make a really awesome Dredge card and just put her on front of Aaron, she'll be like, eh.
Well, look, it's tough.
Maybe. You have to understand that people recommend cards to me all the time. Like, it's always there's the meme of Dredge got new toys, and most of the time we don't want it. And so I was a little skeptical, but I'll admit I saw the light, and I ate a lot of crow, and
it's fine,
now I don't leave the house without it.
There you
so
go.
We want to hear to number 3. Reuben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is my red entry on the list that isn't Bloodbraid Elf. It is. I've talked about this card a million times. It was number 1 on one of my other lists. It's won 2 Pro Tours. It's in the cube. It's banned in Modern. It's Splinter Twin. Splinter Twin, 2 colorless blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature has tap, create a token that's a copy of this creature, except it has haste. Exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. We recently covered rogues. My number 1 rogue was Pestermite because of a lot of it because of this card. This card, originally from Rise of the Eldrazi, only been reprinted in Modern Masters 2015. Still $15, even though it doesn't really see play in any other format. It did win the first Modern Pro Tour in Philadelphia in 2011, and then later won another Modern Pro Tour in Washington, D.C. In 2015. It is a terror, and it's absurd. Yeah.
Another one of those cards that has a very devoted following. There are just some people out there that every time, banning and, the banning announcement comes around, they're like, free Splinter Twin! And, they want nothing more than to win the game with a Pestermite and a Deceiver X art.
This was my number 8, and this is just... It's just a hell of a Magic card. It's a card that is like, it's primed, right? It just needed that one thing. It needed, Deceiver Exarch showed up right when it needed to for a standard combo that Patrick Chapin was like, wait, you guys, this is infinite, right? And everyone was like, what? What do you mean it's infinite? And everyone lost their minds, and Splinter Twin was a thing forever thereafter. And this is a card that we have had in the top 10 red cards, the top 10 most important cards in the modern era, the top 10 2-card combos, top 10 auras, and then now top 10 for CMC cards.
Pretty sure it was my top aura. Also,
it probably was. That said, Aaron, what's number 3?
My number 3, I've talked a lot about cards that people kind of walk into, and this is another one of those cards that, you can certainly pay for it. I don't think I've ever paid for it before, but you can. It's also a mechanic or a type of card that I would love to see in Standard again. We are going back to Zendikar, and traps are something that people really enjoyed, and so this is one of my favorite cards that I love for people to walk into. My number 3 is Mindbreak Trap. So Mindbreak Trap is 2 colorless and 2 blue, originally printed in Zendikar, only printed once, by the way, from the looks of things. It is an instant card. If an opponent casts 3 or more spells this turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay Mindbreak Trap's mana cost, and then you can exile any number of spells. So this is a card that a lot of fair decks will often pack, like your workshops will sometimes run 4 copies of this just because, if they don't have an ideal hand, Storm will just kind of run all over you. And so this is a really great anti-Storm card. Is worth main decking in Vintage because there are so many starts that are like Mox and Lotus blah, and people walk into this all the time, even if you're not playing a broken deck. And so it is main deck worthy in Vintage, sees a lot of sideboard play in other formats. It just feels really, really good. I always like to keep like a finger under the table where it's like 1, 2... and you can also tell good pilots, because if you are the person playing the broken deck, not to walk into this, where you'll do like your 2, and then you'll be like, pass the turn. And yeah, you can go off, but you could also just untap and then play your outcome and just have a safer go of it.
Right. Not run straight into.
Yeah, exactly.
This mythic. This is always weird to me that this was a mythic. I was like, wow.
I mean, free spells should be mythics.
Free spells are certainly mythic feeling, and this is certainly a sweet one.
I'm excited for the rest of Aaron's top 10 to be free spells.
I mean,
to be there is one that I have paid for both of the next 2. There is one that you always have to pay for, and then the other one you usually don't have to. There's some clues for you.
So for what ended up being my second black card in the list, this is a classic creature. I love it to death. This is one of the cards that I first interacted with when I first came into the game. This card is, oh my god, this card is $1,300 freaking dollars. It's part of the reserve list. I've had this thing on my top 10 black cards. I've had it in my cube. I've had it in the top 10 reserve list cards. I've had it in top 10 now. I've had it in my top 100 cards, and I've had it in my top 4 CMC cards. I love Jezum Jin. Jezum Jin showed up originally in Arabian Nights. It is a black, and 2 generic mana for a rare creature Jin. And it's a 5/5, and at the beginning of your upkeep, Jezum Jin deals 1 damage to you. Not necessarily the greatest creature in the world, but it is so iconic. It's $1,300.
I love that you call it Jezum. I say Juzam.
Is it Juzam?
Right.
Juzam?
Juzam. Well, Martin Juza is the Martin Juzam on Twitter, so I'll leave it up to him to say. But,
I mean, we're back at the Jit, Jit,
all of the.
I just thought it was cool. I didn't say it was wrong.
No, I think it's great. I love this card. It's so cool. Mm-hmm. They plastered this on everything back in the day, and for good reason. It's a fantastic image.
Yeah. I mean, the image is iconic. The spell itself is outclassed at this point, but I mean, back in the day, it was certainly one of the most indelible creatures in what was Type 2 at the time, I guess.
Because you got to remember, at the time, this was an overpowered mess. They were like, oh my god, we screwed it up. There's no way it should have been this good. We should back up this train, yada, yada, yada. And only over time have we finally kind of passed this and then some, quite frankly. Yeah. Let's move on here to number 2. My number 2 is higher on someone else's list, and it's a hell of a number 1. I'll take it. Reuben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is also higher on someone else's
list. Bunch of bums.
Aaron, what's number 2?
So my number 2 is another one of those cards that had a very devoted following for a long time. People loved it. They were waiting for it to really bust out and do something. It never really did. It always had these kind of pockets of success, and then it would go away. But only in the last year or so, with the rise of Hogak and Stitcher Supplier, did this card really start to bust out and create a permanent home for itself in multiple formats. And thank God it was reprinted, because it was getting pretty wild for a while there. My number 2 is Vengevine. So Vengevine is 2 colorless and 2 green. It's a creature type elemental, originally printed in Rise of the Eldrazi. 4 power, 3 toughness with haste. Whenever you cast a spell, if it's the second creature spell you cast this turn, you may return Vengevine from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you pair this with things like your grave crawlers, your Stitcher Suppliers. You'll sometimes even play subpar creatures like Memnites or Ornithopters just to be able to get this thing going. Or Hollow One is really, really great right now. Hollowvine has been a tier 1 deck in Vintage for a while. You can pay for this, but you're probably not going to. And so this is just a really great busted card. Very flavorful, being able to kill it and it's going to come back again. I love the play style around this, that you want to carefully craft your hand to where you want to play just enough creatures, but you also want to sandbag a couple just in case they do deal with it. You'll bring them right back, and this card just ends games so quickly.
This is the card where, I'm officially asking Wizards, please stop reprinting it. It's down to $5 now. We get it. It was an Ultimate Masters and Double Masters as a mythic. Good. That's fine. It's okay, we get it. It's affordable now. Thank you. Print something else.
Maybe people will stop playing it.
Stop printing and stop printing Sundering Titan, for God's sake. Oh my God. Stop it. No, this card is great.
I love me a Vengevine.
Vengevine's fantastic. This card was amazing in Hogak, of course. Back in the day, it was in Rug Pod decks or whatever. This thing seemed playing stuff like elves. They've thrown this thing everywhere.
I mean,
Vengevine plus creatures is great.
This card is kind of the reason, the biggest shove over the hill of why Survival got banned in Legacy.
It really was.
You go get Basking Root Wallas, discard of Root Walla, put it into play, go get whatever else, doesn't matter. Here come 2 Vengevines, and Bob's your uncle. Vengevine's just a fun time. The decks that are around it are interesting and cool and unique. I think Vengevine is. I think it's neat.
It's super neat. It was cool back in the day when it first showed up, sort of as almost like a value thing, right? You didn't have to try too hard to make it great. Yeah. You just kept playing creatures.
Yeah. But then over time, you just play it on turn 4, it dies, and then later you're like, all right, Birds of Paradise attack you for 4.
Exactly. It would come out of nowhere in many ways, but when decks started to build around it and build with it in mind, it got a lot more interesting and more powerful. So let's move on here to our number 1. It clearly looks like we have Reuben's number 2 is my number 1. My number 2 is Reuben's number 1. We cross the streams right at the end. I don't know if there's anything wrong with that. That's okay.
I love that there's not even a remote possibility that we share.
No way. I don't think so. Well, look, and I think that your number 1, Aaron, is my number 4.
Okay.
So let's tackle that one first. Aaron, what is your number 1?
So, I've covered a lot of really great cards, that make me feel things. I want the most broken cards possible. I want the cards that see play in multiple formats, because that means a card is truly powerful when it can break into, the more formats. And, this is a card that is a 10 on the Storm scale. It's named after itself. And this is just a primary win condition in Vintage and Legacy. The reason why I don't play Modern Storm is because I don't want to count that high. I'll count to 10, but I'm not counting to 20. My number 1 is Tendrils of Agony. So Tendrils of Agony is 2 colorless and 2 black, originally printed in Scourge. It is a sorcery. Target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, and it has Storm. So this is your primary win condition in both Legacy and Vintage Storm. You can run Empty the Warrens if you want to, but this is really what you're going for. And so you really want to just kind of chain your rituals together, your Infernal Tutors or whatever else you're going to use. If you're playing Vintage, you can use your Moxen to get Storm. And even if you don't necessarily have to kill, this is something that you can use as just a buffer, because that you're running either Yogg-Will or Past in Flames, and you'll get another bite at the apple. And so this is another one of those things that if you've never lived until you've gone off with Tendrils of Agony, particularly on turn 1 or 2, it just feels incredible.
It was my number 4, as it turns out. Wizards kind of lost their mind in 2008 and made it a Friday Night Magic promo, and I don't know why you would ever associate Tendrils of Agony with Friday Night Magic, but they did put Storm in Walmart, so who knows?
It's also a card that traditionally you don't run 4 of in your deck.
Yeah.
You're in like
Run
the one of,
one,
right?
maybe one in the sideboard if you're worried about getting surgical, but
Right. So it's cool. But this card, it defines an entire archetype, an entire way of playing Magic. You know what I mean? Like, nobody plays Magic like you play a Storm deck. It's completely unique. It's totally weird. It's somewhat overpowered at times, but still, like, it's like one of the greatest math puzzles you could ever solve over and over again.
I thought for sure Dread Return was going to be your number one. I thought for sure.
Dread Return has kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. It's seen as more of a win more card, so we don't really run it too much. And I've cast enough Dread Returns, and sometimes the bloom's off the rose, but I never get tired of this.
You're and also ad nauseum tendrils like that. It defines the entire archetype. You're totally right.
Yeah, it's incredible to me how important, like how much this card kind of says. It gives you the roadmap for how you're going to win. It explains the mechanic as to how it's powerful, and it is busted. It is ridiculous. All right, Reuben, what is my number 2 and your number 1?
My number 1, your number 2, and I flip-flopped on these, so it's super understandable to see why these would be our picks. Has won 4 Pro Tours, right? Like, it won Worlds in 94. It won Pro Tour 1. So Zach Dolan won Worlds in 94. Michael Lecanto won Pro Tour 1. Daniel Zink won Worlds in 2003 with Wake. And then the very next year, Julian Neuton won Worlds in 2004 with Slide. Not only that, but it's inspired dozens of other cards. It's inspired cards that have won other Pro Tours. A version of this card won Pro Tour Paris with Ben Stark in Cawblade. That was Day of Judgment. Worlds 2013, one of Shahar's back-to-backs, was a blue-white-red control deck that had, what was the other 4-mana Wrath? Whatever. And then World Championship number 26.
Day of Judgment or whatever?
Day of Judgment, that's the one. And then PV won with blue-white control with Shatter the Sky at the World Championship 26 to solidify his legacy. Of course, I'm talking about Wrath of God.
Wrath of God.
Wow.
It's Wrath of God.
Baby. There's no card that's more important on turn 4 for my money. Yep. Like a bunch of the other cards you can play on turn 5, maybe turn 10, and it doesn't really matter. You got to have Wrath on turn 4. Wrath of God, 2 colorless, white. It's been printed a million times. There's an invocation. It's in From the Vault Annihilation. Destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated.
That's it. And it showed back up in Amonkhet Remastered, so it's on Magic Arena. It was reprinted in Double Masters because it was starting to get a little pricey-ish there, $5+, $6, $7 or whatever. This is just a hell of a Magic card. This is the card that when you first learned to play Magic back in the day, or at least maybe even these days, I'd hope so, but what's a Wrath effect? What does this mean? Why is this important? Why is it 4 mana? Why does it need to be 4 mana? Like, why is it only 4 mana? Why is that good? Why is that bad? Yes, Wizards kind of shied away because of the religious whatever incantations. Then later they could say, well, we don't talk about regeneration anymore, so we can just do Day of Judgment. But there is nothing as classic as a Wrath of God.
But you're forgetting the best part of the Wrath, though, is that AS. Like, just, wow. You got the cakes in the front.
Cakes in the front, everyone.
Listen, live fast, die young, leave a beautiful corpse.
Exactly.
Quentin Hoover will, draw that beautiful corpse face down, butt up.
Yeah. Face. You know what? I'm not doing
That's the way I like to cast my Wraths.
Lord Almighty.
Turn 4.
Look.
We got these Wait, hold on. We got some Wraths in this house.
Face down, Wrath up.
Hold on.
Wraths in this house. We got some Wraths in this house.
And Path. Wrath and Path.
Oh my god.
Certified Wrath. 7 days a week.
God almighty. This is, and my number 1 is in my top 10 most important cards of the modern era, top 10 control finishers, top 10 mythics, top 10 blue cards, top 100 cards, top 10 planeswalkers. You can't, top 10 cards of the decade.
Yep.
Number 1 with a bullet is Jace the Mind Sculptor. I have spoken so many times about this card over and over again. Still $50+, even if it just got printed in Double Masters. Jace the Mind Sculptor has songs written about it, everybody.
Yeah.
2 blue, 2 generic mana for a 3 loyalty mythic planeswalker, legendary planeswalker Jace. For +2, you look at the top card of target player's library. You may put that card on the bottom of that player's library. 0: draw 3 cards and put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order, aka Brainstorm. -1: return target creature to its owner's hand, aka Unsummon. And -12, exile all cards from target player's library. Then that player shuffles their hand into their library. That's what it does. It does everything.
What can we add that hasn't already been said over the years? I mean, it's been in every archetype that could cast it and could benefit from a slightly longer game. The first Brainstorm is worth the card. The second Brainstorm is essentially just gravy on top of that.
It's crazy, yeah.
And it brought Brainstorm to a new generation. The backbone of the legacy format, now available to you in standard, extended, modern, all of those new formats. And it was banned from the very beginning, and then through much fanfare was brought back to modern. And apparently it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine.
So
it's okay. It's fine. Look, Jace the Mind Sculptor is just an incredible planeswalker. One of the only planeswalkers that actually sees some commander play, just because like it's good enough and more powerful and impactful enough. But like whenever it shows up, it's always exciting. I love the art. I'm so glad they didn't go back to the Mythic Edition art for the Double Masters. The Double Masters extended art is the only extended art that has the original art, so you can get the whole Jason Chan experience. I cannot tell you how many times I have begged Jason Chan to show up at an event. Back in the day when I worked at SDG, I'm telling you, it was like, please, would you please show up? They would never show up at an event.
Didn't he do Phyrexian Unlife?
He did all sorts of awesome stuff. Yeah. He did incredible.
That's one I would have followed him anywhere for, yeah.
Jason Chan's incredible.
Jace is the main character at this point of Magic the Gathering. When you think of Jace,
he's the Mickey Mouse Magic.
This card.
Right.
You don't think of Jace Beleren, the first one. You don't think of the newest one, Jace Cunning Castaway, or whatever came out, or Jace Wielder of Mysteries. You don't think of any other Jace. You think of Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Absolutely. And that was our top 10 for CMC cards. You'll see them on the screen right now. If you review, take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Reuben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Reuben.
We've got some 4s in this house.
Jesus.
Oh, my Lord, we do. We really do, don't we? Move on to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, Cardhoarder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell and Reuben Bressler. You guys for watching or listening. I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online on twitch.tv at magicmics, on Twitter at magicmicescast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mike's page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at magicmikespodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmikespodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes and Spotify, or join us here next week. Same time, same place for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.